There are so very many ways of being double that it can become painful to try thinking about it for too long. A shadow is as much a doppelganger as a face in the mirror is. Some duplicates stare at each other, unblinking, the closer together they become. Others stalk in spirals, if not unaware of the existence of a second self, then certainly hoping that they may never cross paths. They may hover before a foggy reflection in the dark, eyes closed so as to never see the shapes upon the glass warping inward from either side. Some have far too many eyes between them. Some have none at all. Others take it in turns. And some seem to find themselves to be forever on opposite sides of a great invisible war.
Hanagammon is a South African writer based in Cape Town. Her first short story, The Undertaker's Apprentice, won the Commonwealth Short Story Prize. Her new novel from Tartarus Press is The Specimens. Thank you for joining me, Hannah.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.
This is a wonderful novel, and the story is a wonderful story. And it makes me wonder a bit about your approach to writing because this novel is so unusual. Eh, I must admit that most novels I read are probably easily described as thrillers, and most of them are easily adaptable into movies. This is a thrilling book to read, but that's because you take us places with your prose that we could not get to in a movie. We could not get to in a thriller. Talk about your understanding of storytelling. It's as if your stories are dreams almost.
Yes, for this story and for my writing in general, I was very inspired by dreams and about subconscious states of mind. I did want to, some of the scenes I did write intentionally to feel very dreamlike and very surreal. And I was very inspired by other writers, other artists who have um, similar surreal kind of dreamlike ways of telling their stories. One of my big inspirations was David Lynch. Um, and I was also very inspired by a lot of the literary and artistic movements of the 1920s, which was where you really start to see a lot of exploration of the subconscious, um, a lot of more surrealistic and expressionistic ways of thinking. The German expressionist movement in particular um, was a very big influence on me. And there are a few references to that in the novel.
When I read this book, what I first thought of was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, told from entirely from the perspective of the monster, as opposed to uh, the doctor who creates them. So I'm wondering, I think that one of the real super strengths of this novel is the decision to tell the story entirely from BEC-04's point of view, and that's as much of a name as we ever get in this novel. I don't want to give any spoilers, but I will say that is the name of the character. Talk about deciding to tell a story from the perspective of a monster who is not exactly human.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Frankenstein because that is another huge inspiration to me. It's one of my favorite books. The first time that I read it, I immediately empathized with the character of the monster.
And,
Um,
one of the things too I thought about as I read this book, especially the opening, was that as I understand it, Mary Shelley was at the famous a weekend retreat with her husband and some other writers, and that she had a nightmare where she woke up
Yes,
and saw the face of the creature hovering over her, and that
yes,
image hovered over me throughout reading this novel.
yes. I did want to I did very intentionally when I was writing this novel want to work with the archetype of the monster, um, of the this uncanny being that is but is not quite human. And I definitely wanted to um, write a story from the perspective of the outsider, of the other. Um, I uh, I also don't want to spoil too much, but the other is quite a central concept to the story. Um, and I really just wanted to work with how otherness has been portrayed in the horror genre. Um, Otherness in many different forms. Here I'm working a lot with psychiatric otherness.
You know,
Um,
one of the things too that uh, I loved about this novel is your sense of horror. It's not a sense of fear of, some kind of monster, biting off your arm or something. It's just a sense of the surreal and the strange and the intrusive, intruding on your world. Our world and our lives depend on stability of things remaining the same from one second to the next. And in BEC's Forge world, I mean, things can change just by, where he is and just by your virtue of your incredible prose. So talk about, that sense, your sense of the horror genre, because it's not the horror genre that, of, say, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the horror genre of, Mulholland Drive.
yes, so I really wanted the horror and the sense of fear in this novel to come not from fearing the monster or this othered figure as much as from the thought of being the othered, being other, existing in a world that was not designed with you in mind. And that draws a lot from uh, psychiatric othering, from the pathologization of mental illness. A lot of my own experiences come into this. And I really just wanted to portray the confusion of uh, being an other, really.
I love that idea of fear not of the other, but of being the other.
Mm.
And that is, of course, extremely, important in our current world because, uh, you know, the people with guns and missiles are in the process of othering people who do not have those things. And so understanding a world that you can that you can exist in but not have any control over is just really an important perspective. Also, I think that for me at least, this book really took a page from any number of unfortunate experiments I myself perhaps made with psychedelic substances that just did not work for me the way they were supposed to. There were no illuminations for me. So I'm wondering if you would care to talk about um the the surreal as outgrowth both of internal perceptions, but also those, altered perceptions.
Yes, so I can't really speak to inspiration or influence from psychedelic substances. In regards to the surrealistic quality of the novel, that was, like I said a bit earlier, very much intended to be dreamlike, or perhaps existing in that rather uncanny, confusing space between dream and waking. Um, and I mentioned the German Expressionist movement as one of my big inspirations. Um, I, again, with the sleeping, waking, dreaming aspect, that inspiration in particular, that came from one of my all-time favorite films, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Um, I wanted to really try capture the way that that film made me feel, that very surreal, disorienting um, setting. Um, I
That
wanted to
word
try translate that to prose.
mission accomplished, and that word disorienting, I think, is a important and excellent description of your approach to horror. In that, what's terrifying is that these angles and these views, and the not quite understanding the world around you that BEC for experiences. So just one of the things I think that you do too really well to do is to rank up the tension by just introducing us cold to BECL4, and we don't get any information from anybody else. It's the entire um story is told from the third person omniscient point of view of BECL4. And so we don't even, in a sense, know exactly what BECL4 looks like. We get some descriptions from the way he's referred to by the humans he comes across. Talk about creating his, the first environment he exists in, some kind of a facility for testing or labs. There's doctors, and there's another BECO3, a very important constituent to the story.
Yes, so I created the setting of this research facility. I created it with the intention of feeling very sterile, very like a place that should make sense, and that to um, many of the characters who are in positions of power in the story, namely the doctors, it's a place that does make sense. It's a place of observation, it's a place of science, it's a place of experiment. But to BECO4, it is simultaneously one of the only spaces he's ever known, and it is at the same time a a confusing space. It's a limiting space. Um, it's often quite an overwhelming space. I uh, emphasize the senses a lot, both in this facility setting and also later when he finds his way into the town. Um, I um, wrote the setting of the facility with the intention of it being this very cold, clinical place, as hospitals or psychiatric facilities often are, but at the same time, it's a place of um, being controlled, being othered.
Also, too, it has the feel, and I just got slow to the party. Tweak to this that there's a real feel of a place where something would take place like out of a David Cronenberg movie. The filmmaker, very much otherness, and I think that the one of the things that I really like is that through the novel, the main doctor who attends to and studies and takes care of BCL4, Dr. G, we come to really like this character, even though, there's a sense that maybe he's doing something really awful.
Yes, I did. I I had a lot of fun writing this character. Um, I don't want to spoil too much, um, but it was interesting to write a character who appears to be very benevolent and understanding, but is ultimately not quite what they seem. Um, and I'm just trying to think how to speak to this character without giving away too much. Um, but uh, I did very much want to speak to the idea of abuses of power within um, these institutions of um, psychiatry, um, of the hospital setting, of that sort of thing.
Now, I am guessing that when you wrote this, did you just dive in into the deep end of BC4's perceptions and plow ahead with um only the vaguest idea of where you were going, or did you understand the whole plot structure before? Because I think one of the things that you do quite well is use character perception and characters to propel the plot and make us turn the pages, even though as we turn the pages, it's like, okay, I'm going to go into this dark, dark tunnel filled with cobwebs. Yes, I'm going to keep going and keep making myself even more and more uncomfortable. It's a wonderful feeling because, again, it's not like we're going into a place where we're going to be harmed, just into a place where our understandings and assumptions of what's real and important in life no longer matter.
Yes, so this novel initially it was the characters that came to me first as
Mm.
ideas, and I just wrote down these ideas for characters, for who they are, for um, what what they do, their personalities, and they existed as rather vague concepts um, for quite a long time, just vague notes that I wrote down thinking I would like to do something with this. Um, and it was quite a long process putting together all of these um, figures and settings, um, initially in just some very rough drafts that I wrote by hand in a notebook, and then going over those drafts and editing and taking out and adding and uncovering really what my intentions were with this narrative and where I wanted it to go.
So you had to
Um,
dig into your own subconscious to create a subconscious world.
yes,
Now, let's talk a little bit about BECO4 because we soon realized this isn't exactly human. And it's revealed on the cover of the book, at least, that this creature has four eyes, two pairs of eyes. And I
yes.
think that's a really odd and interesting uh, creation, given that he also is able to do other things that mostly humans, at least, cannot do repeatedly under scientific investigation. So, talk about creating a character who's not quite human, but um, we get some ideas of what he looks like. And those are interesting revelations. So, talk about again, you know, what he can and can't do, and why the decision to have two pairs of eyes, which is creepy, but not that creepy, if you know what I mean.
So, actually, the thing with the two pairs of eyes, that was one of the first things that came to me when I was putting together the very rough concepts of this character in my head initially, a couple of years ago. Um, I knew I wanted to do something to do with eyes, and I was thinking a lot about the symbolic association of eyes and of seeing and of being seen and of being able to see things that most others cannot, and also of not being able to see things that many others can. And that again goes back to the central theme of otherness and of being othered, and I suppose to an extent disability theory, which is quite um, central to this narrative as well. Um,
What do you mean by disability theory?
Disability theory here, I'm focusing mainly on psychiatric otherness, mental illness, neurodivergence. Um, a lot of what happens in the novel, I think I mentioned earlier, comes from my own uh, experiences with that. Um, and I was
What
just
are your experiences with that? Can you
my
talk about that?
experiences. Oh, yes. So I am autistic. Um, and uh, I did write the novel with uh, intending for the character of BECO4 to reflect some aspects of my experience with that.
That's fascinating. One of the things that is clearly important in this novel is twinning and doppelgangers. BECO4 has a doppelganger, a female doppelganger, BECO3, whom we don't see much about, and we hear a little bit about her. Talk about creating her, and was the decision to for her and the other doubles we encounter in this novel, was that an early part of the novel the conception, or is this something you discovered in the writing itself?
So, BECO3 was another very interesting character to write. Um, and I knew from the beginning when I first started with these very vague concepts of what this story was and where I wanted it to go, I knew from the start that I wanted doubleness to be an important part of the story. Um, And um, I use a lot of imagery to do with mirrors, to do with shadows. Um, I was inspired by the Gothic trope of the dark double, which shows up a lot in a lot of horror and Gothic literature. I really wanted to play with that. I wanted to play with the idea of BEC03 existing as this shadow of BEC04, who is ultimately not that different to him, although she is initially characterized by others as this very volatile, shadowy, unknowable being who needs to be sealed away for her own safety and the safety of everybody else.
B4, CO4 has some unusual abilities, and I just wanted to talk to you a bit about the genre of this novel in terms of both the horror, which is it's really a brilliantly done because of the prose just keeps this really creepy atmosphere just completely alive, unlike anything, almost anything I've ever read. Maybe the people who first read Edgar Allan Poe stories might have had that same kind of feeling, not having ever encountered it before. And that's one of the brilliant aspects of this book is it's like nothing anybody who picks up a novel has ever read before. And that's that's hard to accomplish. Um, but so on one hand, you have this kind of pervasive creepiness. But on the other hand, there's a little bit of a science fiction twinge in this novel, but it's never overt. It's never, there are no info dumps in this novel where, somebody stops and goes, well, by this, I mean, blah, here's the explanation of what's going on. So did you have to excise an info dump from this novel? Would it be possible to do one? And talk about creating the science fiction aspect of it.
Well, I did not go into this novel with the idea of I want to write a science fiction novel or I want to write a horror novel. Um, I didn't have any specific genre in mind. Um, and I wanted to write in a way that blurs genre and a way that incorporates elements of multiple different genres of science fiction or speculative fiction, and then also the gothic and then horror as well. Um,
Boy, that's a hard target to hit, and I must say you absolutely nailed it on all three. So thank you. It's really a wonderful reading experience.
thank you.
Um, you know, I- talk about now we get and as part of the plot, BEC has a couple of abilities that humans don't have, and also he our best descriptions of what we're reading this book and I'm thinking, well, what the hell is this thing? Because you really don't get a physical description. You do eventually talk about making the decision to reveal the physical description, of the main character well into the book, and also the decision that we see pretty early on in the book of the two abilities that BCL4 has that in a sense drive the plot.
Well, I did again, it comes back to blurring. Uh, just now I was talking about blurring of genre, and here I very much wanted to blur the sense of human and um, non-human. And I'm glad that you said that you got a sense of what the heck is this thing. Um, because I did definitely want to play a lot with um, dehumanization um, as an extension of othering. Um, and I think that BECO4's abilities, his physical features that um, imply that he is something not quite human. Those were things that I really wanted to use for this character as both something through which he can gain some level of power. Um, he does at several points use his abilities to gain control over various situations, but they're what got him in this situation in the first place. He's being studied as a specimen because of his unusual features and his unusual abilities. Um, he is a specimen, as the title
I
is.
must say the title is plural.
Yes, yes, that was very intentional. I did want to include that element of doubleness in the title because it is very important throughout the book.
You know, one of the things that I thought was very interesting was the precautions and the fear of the humans who have to work with BUCO4. And again, it's kind of hinted at. There are crowns that people have to wear and shields, and so it makes us feel like, you're telling the story of the atom bomb in a sense from the perspective of uranium, refined uranium, looking out at the scientists who are just going, oh my God, this is really scary. And I think that's a, that, gosh, all these things just occur to me now. Um, that by showing the fear of the humans and the precautions they take, that does all the work of, you know, monsters and giant toothy things and tentacled critters in the night. Because if these humans are so terrified of BeCO4, there's something there. Yet we're right there with him, and we think he's kind of cuddly and nice, not too nice. And that again is the other thing is that within this childlike being is a fully rational and relatively adult and calm and cool intellect, where and so talk about creating, the character of BCO4 is he seems pretty darn reasonable and he's not like gonna get all wedged out of shape about this. He's just going to realize he's in a situation that he has to deal with as who he is.
Yes, so fear of the unknown, that is definitely something that is quite important to BEC04's characterization, or perhaps rather the characterization that other characters within the novel, the image of them that they um, form in their own heads, this fear of his abilities, this assumption that he would use them for to gain control over them as they have gained control over him, really. They're afraid of
They're afraid of
really being
the
subject to the same sort of things that he is.
they're afraid of being on the receiving end of the experiments that he would perform because his abilities give him some unique potential for power, or in the same way that the scientists who have locked up the BuCO4 have power over him by virtue of, doors, windows, locks, and the
The
various,
institution of the facility.
uh, you know, um, one of the things as I read this book about halfway through it, I'm pretty used to BCO4 and he goes on a little journey. And then, I think you do a wonderful job of taking us down this rabbit hole, which becomes ever weirder and ever more threatening. Yeah, so, is that something that you knew was going to happen when you wrote the novel? And I have to say, things get to a point where it's like, okay, I've had two tabs of LSD, kind of like with it, and no, now somebody spiked it with 15, and I'm terrified. Talk about, uh, create expanding the plot and the world of this novel, and also just did you imagine the world uh, that surrounds VC from our perspective before you created it from his?
So I did know from the beginning of writing this, I knew that I wanted it to get weird, and I knew that I wanted it to get dark and disorienting and confusing. Um, and I think I may have gone a little bit overboard with the confusion factor, um, in
Oh
some
no.
regards.
Oh no,
But
it's wonderful. It's terrifying and it's very also too throughout this novel, no matter how weird and terrifying and unusual and unhinged things get, there's this feeling of really of a kind of a calm beauty that pervades it and prevents it from just seeming exploitative or any one of those things. So talk about creating the that sense of beauty.
yes, so that sense of so in my writing for this novel and also just in general, I really aim to find a sort of a comfort, a sort of beauty, like you said, in the uncanny and in um, this strange, terrifying, but also beautiful sort of world. Um, I did want to work a lot with the Gothic in regards to um, this strange intersection between the terrifying and the beautiful. I wanted to work a lot with the sublime, um, but also just with the familiar and the beauty in um,
You know that
familiarizing the strange.
also too because there is a section of the novel where BCL4 is out in the world. And I love your sensibility of, the landscape. It always feels like you're in like kind of a small but isolated town. There's surrounded by forests, and it's always dark and slightly dank, but not really threatening. Just in that beautiful way that if you get out into the forest in the night right after it rains, it's really kind of beautiful, if not a little threatening. Um, and I think that that's one of the strengths of this novel is that you do a good job at twinning the comprehensible and the everyday with the unutterably strange um, vision of the comfortable and everyday from the perspective of BEC4. He sees what he might describe something as being strange and upsetting to him, but we see, oh, well, it's dark and quiet and kind of nice. Could be nice out there.
Yes, so again, coming back to doubles, so the opposite of or I suppose rather the dark twin of finding beauty in the unsettling, finding familiarity in the uncanny would be finding fear and discomfort in things that are supposed to be familiar.
Mm.
Um, and I think that that is as important in this novel. Well, it was as important to me when while I was writing it as the strange, frightening beauty of the unknown. The this um fear, this horror of feeling everybody is all right with this, but something is very, very wrong.
Now, you create a really interesting world, a landscape, a backdrop. And when I finished this book, I thought she could write a lot of novels that, intersect with this from different perspectives of different characters. Is this something you've considered, or are you just going to follow Monty Python's advice and now for something completely different?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I am actually currently working on a project that takes place in the same world, the same forest
Oh,
setting.
yay. I can't
Um,
wait.
I I have given a lot of thought to this forest setting and this town um, outside of this forest. And I've come up with a lot of other characters and figures and settings within settings, I suppose. And I have some vague ideas of where I want to take this weird little world. Um, and I am currently working on some projects for that. I'm hoping some of them might end up being published. We'll see.
Well, I would imagine they certainly would be. Now, did you, when you wrote this book, did you like map out where you were going? Or did you just go there?
I had a vague idea of where I wanted the story to go, but a lot of it did unfold and also change along the way. There were some uh, elements that were initially going to be included that I then cut out. I thought they would be better suited to another story within the same world. Um,
Good. So the scraps from the cutting room floor are being assembled into a new movie, so to speak.
hopefully they'll return. They'll come back as something. I'll have to see where it all goes.
Well, I just want to mention a bit about your story, The Undertaker's Apprentice. This is online available at Granta, and I think will give readers a really good idea of what you're about, which is, I think for you, in reading this book and that story, you know, the central mystery is that there are mysterious things which we are not going to understand. There's more than is accounted for in your philosophy. Um, Talk about pre, you know, focusing on what we do not know and cannot understand as a centerpiece of your fiction. I think this is fascinating. There are, some people who attempt that, and Lynch and Cronenberg are two that I think of, and in a sense, Lovecraft, although he had his own set of problems. Um, so talk about focusing on the mystery and keeping it a mystery.
Yes, so there's obviously a lot of narrative potential in fear of the unknown, but I think that there's also a lot of beauty in the unknown and a lot of uh, potential for um, growth within the unknown. I'm thinking specifically of The Undertaker's Apprentice here, where the central motif in that story is a mystery that is never solved, and learning to well, to the characters in that story at least, accepting the unknown, um, that is quite important in that story, and this acceptance and embracing of the unknown, of the uncanny, of the otherworldly is quite important throughout all my writing, I'd say.
You have used the word many times, uncanny,
Uncanny,
originally
yes.
known as unheimlich by,
Unheimlich.
by Mr. Freud. I'm wondering how well versed are you in his writings?
In Freud's writing,
Yeah.
I have studied some Freud at university, not um, particularly in depth, but I have done some research on his theories around the subconscious of the ego and the id and the superego and all of that. Um, and subconscious is quite important to my writing. The uh, I've talked about the dreamlike influences a lot.
How do you know when you are plumbing your subconscious as a writer? I mean, how do you get there? Do you just start blindly in the prose and write, or or does it and get there with the words, or does the state of writing of creation, as it were, in this case using prose, open up doors in your brain to subconscious where you can just like once you have achieved the flow state, so to speak, of writing, you are able to flow into places in your mind where you can't look with your conscious brain.
My ideas often come to me at very strange and inconvenient times. Um, I have a notebook by my bed in case I wake up at 3 in the morning with some idea that needs to be written down, and then I have to try decipher it in the morning. Um, I also get a lot of ideas while I'm walking, which I've heard is actually quite a common space in which a lot of authors and creators um, get their ideas. Um, my personal writing process is quite chaotic. Um, I do sometimes go for rather long periods without writing anything, just letting these things all come together in the back of my head. And then one day something just clicks, and it's usually around like 1 a.m. or something. And then I'm just writing, um, scribbling ideas down in a notebook, or um, typing up on my laptop. And sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. They have to go through a lot of editing, but um, that's how they get there.
Well, as as a writer, it sounds like to me, you have created this world within yourself and are exploring that world. Um, do you feel as a writer that the what's more important to you, the prose or your subconscious?
Mm, I don't think I'd say that either one of them is more important than the other. I think they inform each other.
Mm.
Um, Again, doubleness, two sides of the same coin, at least in my writing process. Um, I do on a very conscious level do my editing and do my research. It's not all just um, stream of consciousness type writing. A lot of
What
it
kind
does
of re
take
what
a
kind
lot
of
of effort.
research do you do? That's really interesting to me. What did you research for this book?
For this book in particular, I did look quite a bit at the the trope, the archetype of the doppelganger, um, and of the dark double figure in Gothic literature. Um,
So
I'm part of yes, sorry.
so your research is literary. It's not like you're looking at science or experiments that we've done on human beings and at various times and
Um,
glorious and inglorious aspects of history.
well, there are some scientific elements to this novel. Like I said, it's not, I didn't write it with the intention of being a science fiction novel. It certainly wasn't meant to be a hard sci-fi novel. That's not really the genre that um, at least at this point, that I really write in. Um, a lot of my research uh, has overlapped with my research for my studies at university, and I'm studying literature. So it has, most of my research has been of a more literary nature than scientific, although I have done a little bit of medical research as well, just to uh, get a slightly better um, or a slightly fuller, I should say, portrayal of life inside this very clinical, scientific setting that BCO4 lives in.
The new novel by Hanagammon is The Specimens. You can read her short story, The Undertaker's Apprentice, online at Granta. Thank you for joining me, Hannah.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, now we are going to do the 3-minute version of that. I'm Rick Kleffel with Time to Read. My guest is Hannah Gammon. Her new novel is The Specimens. Hannah, what kind of novel is this? How would you describe it to somebody who picks up the wonderful Tartarus Press edition and looks at it and says, what the heck is this?
Well, this is a novel that blurs several genres. I have incorporated elements of the speculative and science fiction, as well as the gothic, horror, psychological. Um, it's ultimately it's a novel about otherness, about doubleness, and about familiarity in the uncanny and the uncanny in the familiar.
I might be tempted to describe this novel in a way as a distant cousin of Frankenstein, but told entirely from the perspective of the monster. And you create a character, BECO4, not really a monster. We were with them for the full novel, and we like this character. Talk about creating a character who is not human, but feels like, I guess, kind of a nice guy, if complicated.
Yes, I did. For this novel, I did want to work with the archetype of the monster, this uncanny, human-like but not quite human being, this creature that unsettles the boundary between human and non-human. Um, and I did want to introduce this character as a sympathetic figure, as to through telling the story from his perspective, I that is one of the ways in which I aimed to uh, shift what is considered the uncanny and what is considered the familiar.
You know, for me, one of the most exciting parts of this novel is just to be immersed in your prose, which is just incredibly, wonderfully weird and strange. It's compelling as you read it. It feels like, you know, you have made the decision to um, immerse the reader in your own personal nightmare, and the world around you shifts. It feels very surreal. So talk about the influence of the surreal in this book, and particularly of the German movement that inspired it.
So I'm glad that you mention the nightmarish, or perhaps rather dreamlike um, quality of this narrative, because I did um, very much want to work with the surreal, with the subconscious specifically, um, and the German Expressionist movement. That was a big um, inspiration to me for this novel and also just in general in my writing. Um, that was one of the um, genres that really emerged during the 1920s, where um, the the non-real, the expressionist, the surreal was really examined, and art didn't necessarily have to reflect reality. It could all feel like a dream. Um, and I really wanted to capture that sort of deliberate disorientation in my writing.
The new novel by Hanagammon is The Specimens. You can find it at Tartarus Press. Thank you for joining me, Hannah.
Thank you very much for having me on the show.